Have you ever laid in bed for hours and still woken up feeling like you hadn't slept at all? That isn't just tiredness. It's your spirit gasping for breath in a world that only feeds your body but ignores your soul. Schopenhauer once said, "A man can do what he wants, but not what he wants. Deep beneath our daily choices lies a war, not between right and wrong, but between our spiritual hunger and the noise that silences it." You are not just worn out by responsibilities. You are suffocating under a system that tells you to be productive, but not purposeful. You are drained not because you work too hard, but because everything you do lacks meaning. You smile because you're told to, not because your soul has anything to smile about. And every time you ignore the quiet voice inside, that desperate whisper asking, "Why am I doing this?" your spirit grows quieter and emptier. Modern life has traded solitude for screens, silence for distraction, presence for performance. We live online but die within. Have you noticed the silence is louder now? It follows you everywhere, not in sound, but in feeling. It's not peace, it's absence. And it's trying to tell you something. Schopenhauer believed that man's inner world is far more vast and painful than the outer. We were not made to live in constant motion, yet modern life never stops moving, not to reflect, not to heal, not even to breathe. What you're feeling is the collapse of meaning under the weight of momentum. You keep going not because you know where you're headed, but because the stillness terrifies you. You scroll endlessly, work endlessly, talk endlessly, because silence is where the truth lives, and that truth is hard. You are spiritually starving in a world that pretends purpose can be bought, downloaded, or followed. Your soul doesn't want more dopamine. It wants more direction. It doesn't need another app, another task, or another quote. It needs you, truly you, to stop and listen. Because in the silence is the sound of your own self, buried under years of trying to survive. You wake up exhausted, not from lack of sleep, but from the burden of a life that doesn't feel like yours. A silent scream echoes in your soul each morning asking, "Is this it?" This kind of fatigue goes deeper than the body to spiritual erosion. Day after day, you wear a mask the world wants you to wear. You work jobs that numb your essence. You speak words that aren't your truth. You please others while betraying yourself. And you call this life. Schopenhauer believed that life, when lived unconsciously, becomes a form of quiet desperation. We desire meaning, yet we bury ourselves in distractions. We seek purpose, yet we allow fear and conformity to govern our decisions. We're not just tired, we're drained of soul because the core of who we are has been neglected, exiled, and ignored. You were never meant to just cope. You were meant to feel the aliveness of existence. But modern life traps you in routines that kill slowly. Your spirit knows it. That's why you feel heavy without knowing why. That's why rest never restores you. To begin healing, you must return to yourself. Stop performing. Begin listening. You are not here to fulfill society's checklist. You are here to awaken your true self. Schopenhauer reminds us, it's not the suffering that kills the spirit. It's the meaningless suffering. So ask yourself, what part of me have I abandoned to survive? And more importantly is that, have you ever mistaken your numbness for peace? That hollow calm you feel, it's not tranquility, it's silence after surrender. There's a moment in spiritual exhaustion where the soul no longer even cries out, it simply goes quiet. You don't rage anymore. You don't resist. You just exist. To the outside world, you seem fine. You smile. You show up. You function. But inside, you are suspended, frozen in a life that no longer stirs you. Schopenhauer called it the dull agony of resignation, not dramatic suffering, but a quiet erasure of self. You have learned to suppress your desires so long they no longer bother rising. You have adapted so well to disappointment. You no longer expect anything. You have stopped hoping, not because you've grown wise, but because you're too tired to be hurt again. And yet this numbness is not peace. It's the soul's final defense before collapse. To escape this dead zone, you must stop lying to yourself. You must stop calling your despair maturity. You must stop romanticizing endurance as strength. Real peace comes from alignment, not avoidance. From truth, not toleration. The world drained you by teaching you that to be loved, you must shrink. That to be accepted, you must pretend. But Schopenhauer challenges us. What is the point of life if living requires the death of your spirit? You are not too weak. You are not broken. You are just empty from trying to become what you never truly were. Now, it's time to remember. Remember the dreams you once held like fire in your chest. What happened to them? Did they fade, or did the world teach you to carry them like weights? At some point, what once inspired you begins to exhaust you, not because the dream has changed, but because the world has forced you to betray it slowly, piece by piece. You wanted to create, but now you chase approval. You wanted to serve truth, but now you sell convenience. You wanted to live freely, but now you survive with a leash. Schopenhauer believed that the human soul is tormented not by the absence of dreams, but by the presence of dreams unrealized, and worse, dreams that have been warped into obligations. Your art becomes labor. Your voice becomes silence. Your gift becomes burden. You feel drained not just because life is hard, but because you are being torn away from your essence. You begin to resent the very thing you once loved, because now it lives under someone else's rules, and so you retreat. You say, maybe this isn't my path, but the truth is your path was hijacked, not lost. The spiritual fatigue comes from pretending your soul can thrive under compromise, but it can't. Your dreams were never meant to be sold. They were meant to be lived, even if only in defiance. So today, ask yourself, do your dreams still light you up, or do they now weigh you down? If it's the latter, perhaps it's time to reclaim them. Have you noticed how loud the world has become, not just in volume, but in pressure? Noise isn't always sound. Sometimes it's expectation. Every second of your day is invaded, by opinions, by comparisons, by the silent demands of a world that never stops watching. You wake up to a flood of information: what you should wear, who you should be, what success should look like. Your mind barely belongs to you anymore. It's rented out to trends, to metrics, to distractions dressed as purpose. Schopenhauer warned of this creeping madness, the erosion of the self through excessive stimulation. He believed the inner life, your spirit, requires solitude, silence, and depth. But now, silence is feared. Stillness is mistaken for laziness, and solitude is painted as loneliness. So you stay plugged in, you scroll, you respond, you perform, until one day you forget the sound of your own thoughts. You're not just tired, you're spiritually suffocated, because the soul doesn't thrive in chaos, it wilts. And in a world that never shuts up, Those who don't pause will never hear the call of their own truth. You must learn to step back, to reclaim the sacred, to allow your mind to be quiet enough so your soul can speak again. You thought freedom would come with success, more money, more respect, more control, but nah. Why does it feel like you're the prisoner of the very life you built? You chased a dream, worked harder than anyone, sacrificed sleep, youth, and even time with those you loved. For what? A title, a house, a name that echoes in rooms filled with people who only know the mask you wear? The world sold you a vision. Success is salvation, but Schopenhauer knew better. He warned that human desire is a trap, a constant hunger disguised as ambition. Every time you attain, the void inside shifts, grows, demands more. You are not at peace, you are merely exhausted inside a golden cage. You smile, but it's hollow. You achieve, but it no longer excites you. You win, but the victory feels numb, because true success isn't about what you accumulate, it's about what no longer owns you. Peace, stillness, meaning. These are not bought. They're earned through detachment from the illusion that more is always better. You're not just tired because you've worked hard. You're tired because you've worked for the wrong prize. It's time to UNLEARN. To escape the cage. To redefine success on your own terms, where the soul breathes, not burns. You laugh with others. You shake hands, nod politely, maybe even post pictures that say, "I'm doing fine." But late at night, when the world is quiet, there's a question that haunts you. Why do I feel so alone when I am surrounded by people? This is not physical loneliness. You have friends, family, followers, but deep within, there's a hollowness, a space no conversation can fill. Schopenhauer called this the silent scream of existence. To live among others, yet feel unseen. To connect through words, but never through soul. The modern world offers countless ways to be in touch, but few paths to be truly understood. You perform roles: child, partner, professional, believer. But who are you when no one is watching? You begin to realize it's not the absence of people that hurts. It's the absence of depth. Of realness, of truth. Your exhaustion isn't just emotional, it's existential. You've been pouring energy into surfaces, not substance. And the soul, unlike the ego, withers when it lacks authenticity. But here's the paradox. Sometimes loneliness is the beginning of awakening. When no one else sees you, you are forced to see yourself. Raw, naked, honest. And that's where healing begins. Not in filling your life with noise, but in learning how to sit in silence and still feel whole. You did everything right. You followed the rules. You worked hard. You climbed the ladder. But now that you're here, why does it still feel like something is missing? They told you success would bring peace, that if you just earned more, achieved more, looked perfect enough, the emptiness would go away. But no one warned you the greatest danger isn't failure. It's success that leaves your spirit starving. You wake up in the morning and tick the boxes. Goals, emails, meetings, milestones. You smile when congratulated. You nod when praised. But inside, there's a quiet ache, a sacred sadness. Schopenhauer understood this paradox. He wrote that desire is like a flame, and once it is fed, it asks for more, then more, until the soul is engulfed not in joy, but in restlessness. The truth is, you've spent your life building a throne for your ego that left your soul homeless. You've become excellent at surviving, but forgotten how to feel alive. Spiritual exhaustion isn't cured by vacations, or wine, or weekends off. It demands a radical reorientation, a return to something real. To simplicity, to stillness. To moments that require nothing yet mean everything. The soul doesn't care about your resume. It only asks, were you present? Were you kind? Were you real? They see your smile and think you're fine. But no one hears the scream behind your silence. No one sees the soul that's quietly breaking. While pretending to be strong, there's a kind of exhaustion that sleep cannot fix. It lingers beneath the surface of your laughter. It sits behind your eyes in moments of stillness. It's the weight of spiritual disconnection, a silent war between who you pretend to be and who you truly are. You say, I'm okay, because it's easier. Easier than explaining the ache, easier than admitting that something inside you is slowly fading. You laugh in conversations, you perform in crowds, but when you're finally alone, there is a haunting quiet that wraps around your spirit like a fog. Schopenhauer believed that the world is not designed to fulfill our desires, but to agitate them endlessly. In a society that rewards masks, being real has become an act of rebellion. This is the paradox of the spiritually drained. You become too good at pretending, too efficient at functioning while bleeding on the inside. But healing doesn't begin with escape, it begins with honesty. It starts the moment you stop pretending. The moment you admit, I am tired, not of life, but of pretending to be okay in a world that doesn't care if I'm not. Let that be your liberation. Let the scream beneath your smile rise and become your truth, because your soul doesn't want perfection. It wants peace. You don't just feel tired, you feel empty. And sometimes that emptiness is heavier than pain. There are moments when the world feels silent, not because it is peaceful, but because nothing feels real anymore. You wake up, go through the motions, do what is expected, but it all feels like a performance for an audience that isn't even watching. This is the fatigue of disconnection from purpose, a spiritual erosion that slowly convinces you that nothing matters. Not because you've thought deeply and found it true, but because your soul is starved of meaning. Schopenhauer once said, a man can do what he wills, but he cannot what he wills. In that paradox lies the despair of modern existence. We chase goals we never chose. We live lives crafted by algorithms and expectations. We become machines that smile on cue and perform when needed. But when the curtain falls, when you're alone in your room, staring at the ceiling in the dark, the truth returns like a whisper. None of this is making me feel alive. This is not depression. It is spiritual starvation, the soul gasping for depth in a world obsessed with surface. You are not broken. You are misaligned. You are surrounded by noise, yet dying for silence, drowning in content, yet starved of meaning. You feel numb not because you don't care, but because you care too deeply in a world that punishes depth. The way out isn't in doing more. It's in asking why. Why do you wake up? Why do you endure? Why do you keep pretending that this is all there is? Sometimes the most radical act is to pause and reclaim your right to meaning. You laugh in public, you smile in photos, but when the lights go out, something inside you screams. There's a kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from activity, but from suppression. You've been silencing parts of yourself for so long, your doubts, your questions, your anger, your sensitivity, that now even your joy feels forced. This is the exhaustion of pretending, of molding yourself to fit expectations you never agreed too, of becoming what others find acceptable, while slowly killing the truth within you. Schopenhauer spoke of the will to live as blind and irrational, but what happens when your will becomes a cage? When you no longer know what you want, because every choice you make is filtered through fear of rejection, you're not just tired, you're spiritually compressed, like a soul stuffed into a box too small for its shape. You've learned to stay quiet, to avoid conflict, to keep the peace, but in doing so, you've declared war on yourself. The soul doesn't scream with sound, it screams through restlessness, through numbness, through the invisible ache you carry every day. And here's the truth: no amount of sleep can heal you if your soul is tired of being silenced. The way back is dangerous, because it requires honesty. It means saying things others don't want to hear. It means admitting you're not okay and that you're done faking it. But liberation has a price, the death of your false self. And if you're brave enough to pay it, you may discover that beneath the scream is a voice you've never truly heard before. You wonder why you're always exhausted. But have you ever questioned whose burdens are you really carrying? You were never meant to carry the expectations of your entire family. You were never meant to fix generations of trauma, to always be strong, to always be the one who has it together. But you did, because deep down you believe love had to be earned, that your value was in your usefulness, that being good meant being selfless even if it meant erasing yourself. Now, you walk through life dragging invisible weights, the approval of your parents, the shame of your culture, the silence of your inner child who never got to speak. Schopenhauer believed human suffering was inescapable, but what he couldn't bear was the absurdity of it. Why must we suffer for the comfort of others? Why must we bleed so others can stay warm? This isn't just exhaustion. It's a form of spiritual slavery tied not by chains, but by guilt, fear, and identity. You are not selfish for putting down what was never yours to hold. You are not evil for walking away from people who only love the version of you they could control. You are not wrong for choosing freedom, even if it comes with loneliness, because peace doesn't come from pleasing everyone. It comes from finally hearing the voice that's been drowned out for years, your own. The day you stop carrying other people's burdens is the day you realize how much lighter you were meant to feel. They told you to stay silent, to keep the peace, to avoid conflict. But have you noticed? The more you stayed silent, the more something inside you began to die. You learned it early that silence was safer than rejection, safer than confrontation, safer than being misunderstood. But silence is not peace. Silence is often just fear with a mask on. Every time you swallowed your truth, you taught your soul that its voice didn't matter. You let others rewrite your story, how you stood in the corner, a ghost of who you really were. Schopenhauer once described life as a pendulum, swinging between pain and boredom. But there's a third state he never fully named: numbness. And it's in that numbness that your soul quietly suffocates. When you bite your tongue to avoid making others uncomfortable, you bleed internally. When you don't say no because you're afraid of being disliked, you betray yourself. And when you pretend to be okay just to keep the peace, you turn your life into a quiet war zone where the only casualty is you. Your silence has been misunderstood. It wasn't maturity. It wasn't strength. It was survival. But survival is not the same as living. Your truth may not be soft. It may not be palatable, but it is sacred. You don't need to be loud, you just need to be real. Because authenticity is the most radical act in a world built on performance. Let the words come, let the fire speak, not to burn bridges, but to finally light the path back home to yourself. What if this exhaustion isn't physical? What if the fatigue you carry is the soul's way of begging you to come home? You've tried sleeping more, you've tried disconnecting, you've tried pretending that everything is fine. But the tiredness remains because it was never about the body. It was always the soul crying out for your attention. In a world obsessed with hustle, with goals, noise, and surface pleasures, you forgot that the soul doesn't speak in those languages. The soul whispers. The soul waits, and when you ignore it long enough, it drains. You were not born to merely keep up. You were not born to impress. You were not born to be consumed by the expectations of a world that profits from your emptiness. Schopenhauer taught that the ceaseless striding of life is the root of suffering, but he also hinted at a radical solution: enunciation of the false self, withdrawal from the noise, and a deep return to the inner world. That is the antidote is spiritual exhaustion. Not more stimulation, but less. Not more productivity, but more presence. You don't heal a drained soul by doing more. You heal by being more. Being present with your pain, being honest with your emptiness, being gentle with the one inside you who's been screaming in silence. This is the homecoming, not to a location, but to a forgotten frequency inside of you. Where peace isn't a destination, but your original state. Where joy isn't chased, but remembered. Let go of who the world told you to be. And listen. Beneath the tiredness, beneath the numbness, your soul is still here. Waiting.